"Get us the owner right now," my ex-wife yelled at the country club. "He doesn't belong here." Her new husband added, "Remove him immediately." I stood quietly. The manager smiled. "Sir, how would you like to handle their family's membership?" Their faces dropped. Look, I'm not saying I planned the whole thing like some kind of revenge-obsessed movie villain, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy every single second of what was about to go down. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I last set foot in the Westwood Hills Country Club. And honestly, those 3 years had been pretty damn peaceful, without the constant background noise of champagne-fueled gossip and the kind of fake laughter that makes your teeth hurt just listening to it. The last time I was here, I was still married to Cassandra. Well, technically married. Emotionally, I think she checked out somewhere around our second anniversary, when she realized I wasn't going to magically transform into a trust fund baby who spent his weekends yacht shopping. But I stayed, because that's what you do, right? You work on things. You try. You ignore the fact that your wife looks at you the same way most people look at expired yogurt in the back of the fridge. Then she met Mark. Mark fucking Davenport, a corporate finance guy who wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and thought owning a Rolex made him interesting. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The guy had the personality of a PowerPoint presentation and the charisma of a parking meter. But he had money, and apparently that was Cassandra's primary love language. She left me faster than you can say irreconcilable differences. And 6 months later, she was Mrs. Davenport, living her best life at the very club I was now walking back into. They'd made this place their personal kingdom. Every Sunday brunch, every charity gala, every goddamn opportunity to flash their wealth like a neon sign that screamed, "Look at us, we're better than you." And honestly, good for them. I mean, if you need a country club to validate your existence, you've got bigger problems than I could ever solve. But here's the thing about karma. She's patient, she's creative, and she's got a wicked sense of humor. I pulled into the parking lot that Sunday morning in my completely average car, wearing a navy polo that I'd bought on sale, jeans that were comfortable as hell, and loafers that had seen better days but still had some life in them. Was it club attire? Absolutely not. Did I give a single fuck? Also, no. I wasn't there to play golf or sip overpriced mimosas while pretending to care about the stock market. I was there for something much more satisfying than any of that country club nonsense could ever provide. Closure. Like her whole expression just collapsed in on itself, like a poorly done facelift finally giving up the ghost. It was beautiful. Truly, genuinely beautiful. She went from, "I'm living my best life," to, "Oh fuck, my past just walked in wearing jeans," in about half a second. She immediately leaned toward Mark, and I could read her lips even from across the terrace. What is he doing here? Mark's face went through an impressive range of colors, starting at his normal spray tan orange, moving through pink, and landing solidly on the color of an undercooked steak. The guy looked like he was about to have a medical emergency. And honestly, I was kinda hoping he would. Not in a murderous way, just in a this would make the story even better way. He stood up so fast his chair actually scraped against the marble, that awful sound that makes everyone look. "You don't belong here," he barked, his voice carrying across the entire terrace, because subtlety was apparently not in his vocabulary. "Security!" I smiled. Not a big smile, not some villainous grin, just a small, calm, I know something you don't know kind of smile. "Good morning to you, too," I said pleasantly, because nothing pisses off angry people more than someone being polite when they're losing their minds. The waiter who'd been pouring coffee at the next table literally froze mid-pour. The stream of coffee hanging in the air for a second, like he'd been hit with a pause button. Every member on that terrace turned to look. You could practically smell the scandal in the air, mixing with the overpriced cologne and the scent of fresh croissants. And that's when Cassandra, in all her designer-dressed glory, made her grand declaration. She stood up too, because apparently this was now a standing argument, and pointed at me like I was some kind of intruder who'd crawled in through a window. "Get us the owner right now," she demanded, her voice shrill enough to shatter those fancy chandeliers. "He doesn't belong here." I stayed quiet. I learned a long time ago that when people are digging their own graves, you don't grab the shovel and help them. You just stand back, maybe get some popcorn, and watch the show. Let the loud ones tire themselves out. Let them make all the noise, all the demands, all the self-righteous proclamations about who belongs where and who has the right to exist in their precious spaces. Because here's what Cassandra didn't know, what Mark didn't know, what none of those smug, self-satisfied members sipping their champagne and judging everyone's net worth didn't know. I wasn't there as a guest. I wasn't crashing their precious brunch, or trying to win back my ex-wife, or make some pathetic plea for acceptance into their little rich people club. I was there as the owner, the actual, legal, documented owner of the entire goddamn place. The guy who signed their paychecks. The person who decided whether that terrace got renovated or torn down. The man who could, with a single phone call, turn their social fortress into a parking lot if he felt like it. But I wasn't going to tell them that. Not yet. Because the look on their faces when they found out, that was going to be worth every single day of the 3 years I'd spent away from this place, working my ass off, building something real, while they sipped champagne and pretended their memberships made them important. So I stood there, hands in my pockets, calm as Sunday morning, and waited for the owner they demanded to show up. And when she did, Patricia Lang, the club manager who knew exactly who I was and exactly why I was there, I could barely contain the smile that was threatening to break across my face. This was going to be good. Okay, so before I get into the absolutely delicious part where Cassandra and Mark realize they've royally screwed themselves, you need to understand how I ended up owning the place where my ex-wife plays pretend socialite. Because trust me, this didn't happen by accident. This was years in the making. And it all started with the slowest, most painful divorce since Henry VIII decided collecting wives was his new hobby. 3 years earlier, I was that guy. You know, the one. The reliable husband, the boring one, the one who showed up, did his job, paid the bills, and apparently committed the cardinal sin of not being exciting enough for a woman who thought adventure meant shopping at a different boutique than usual. Cassandra liked to call me reliable the way other people say tumor or jury duty. Like it was some kind of character flaw that I actually showed up when I said I would and didn't blow our savings on a sports car I couldn't afford. "You're just so steady," she'd say. And I swear to God, the way she said steady made it sound like I'd personally offended her ancestors. Like being dependable was somehow worse than being a train wreck. And maybe in her world it was, because in Cassandra's universe, drama equaled passion and stability equaled boredom. And God forbid you be married to someone who didn't create chaos wherever they went. While she was playing socialite, and let me tell you, that woman could turn a simple lunch into a 3-act performance complete with costume changes, I was working my ass off. 60-hour weeks, sometimes more. I was in property management back then, which sounds boring as hell until you realize it's actually fascinating in a how much can possibly go wrong with a building kind of way. I specialized in failing estates and old hotels, the kind of properties that looked like they'd been abandoned since the Reagan administration and smelled like a combination of mold, regret, and expired dreams. But here's the thing about those properties. They had potential. Underneath all that decay and neglect, there was something worth saving. You just had to have the patience to see it through, to put in the work when everyone else had given up. Kinda like my marriage, actually, except the buildings were more grateful for the effort. I'd find these places that everyone else had written off, these gorgeous old structures that just needed someone to believe in them again, and I'd bring them back to life. New plumbing, updated electrical, restored facades, the works. It was hard, thankless work that had you coming home smelling like dust and desperation. But man, when you saw that finished product, when you saw what something could become with the right attention and investment, that was worth every grueling hour. Cassandra didn't see it that way, obviously. She saw a husband who came home tired, who smelled like construction sites, who didn't have the energy to attend every single social event she deemed mandatory for our image. Never mind that I was building something real. Never mind that every project I completed added to our net worth and our future security. No, what mattered was that I wasn't exciting. I wasn't spontaneous. I wasn't Mark fucking Davenport with his private jet and his inability to have a single original thought. The company I worked for hit a rough patch in our 5th year of marriage. Not a disaster, not bankruptcy, just a rough patch. The kind of thing that happens in business when you're making long-term investments instead of chasing quick profits. We had capital tied up in projects that hadn't paid off yet, and yeah, my paychecks got a little smaller for a while. We had to budget, cut back on some of the unnecessary expenses. You know, act like normal people instead of pretending we were auditioning for a reality show about the rich and shameless. Cassandra acted like I'd personally bankrupted us and murdered her dreams in the process. "I can't be married to someone who doesn't have direction," she announced one evening over dinner, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. Direction? That was rich, coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment that year was getting on the planning committee for a charity gala where she spent more on her dress than the event raised for actual charity. I should have seen it coming. Honestly, the signs were all there. The way she'd started mentioning Mark's name more often. Mark said the market is shifting. Mark just bought a house in the Hamptons. Mark thinks we should diversify our portfolio. Lady, we don't have a portfolio to diversify. We have a checking account and a mortgage. Calm down. But I was too busy trying to save our marriage and build my career to notice that she'd already mentally moved on. She'd upgraded me in her head before she'd even filed the papers. I was the old model, the reliable sedan that got you from point A to point B but didn't turn any heads. Mark was the shiny new sports car that made cool sounds and impressed her friends. Never mind that he had the depth of a parking lot puddle. 2 months after she left, she was on Mark's private jet to Maui. 2 months! I'd barely finished processing the divorce papers, and she was already posting Instagram photos with captions like, "New adventures with my forever love," and "Finally found my person." I wanted to comment, "Your person has the personality of a tax form," but I'm petty, not stupid. Social media feuds are for people with too much time and too little dignity. I signed the papers quietly, didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't try to take her to the cleaners the way she probably expected. I gave her the house, that overpriced suburban McMansion she'd insisted we buy because it had the right address, and I walked away. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd upgraded. She'd traded reliable for rich, boring for exciting, steady for spectacular. What Cassandra didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she never actually paid attention to what I did for work, was that the rough patch my company hit wasn't a failure. It was an investment phase, the kind of strategic move you make when you're playing the long game instead of chasing immediate gratification. We were tying up capital in properties that would pay off big in a few years, but you had to have the vision and the patience to wait it out. Patience. That thing I had in spades and Cassandra had never heard of. While the divorce was being finalized, while she was picking out china patterns with Mark and planning their wedding at, you guessed it, the Westwood Hills Country Club, I was making moves. Quiet moves. The kind that don't make for good Instagram posts but make for excellent bank statements down the line. See, that's the thing about being underestimated. That's the beautiful, ironic gift that Cassandra gave me when she left. She thought I was going nowhere, that I'd peaked at reliable property manager who smells like drywall. And that assumption meant she stopped paying attention. She stopped watching. She stopped caring what I was doing with my life, because in her mind, I was already irrelevant. And when people think you're irrelevant, that's when you can make your best moves. That's when you can build an empire while they're busy posting selfies and congratulating themselves on escaping before you drag them down. The rough patch ended. The investments paid off. The properties we'd been nursing back to health started generating serious revenue. And I took my cut of those profits, added them to my divorce settlement savings. Yeah, I actually saved money during my divorce because I'm apparently a masochist who can't stop being responsible even when my life is falling apart, and I started looking at opportunities. Big opportunities. The kind that required partners, capital, and the kind of vision that sees potential where everyone else sees problems. The kind of opportunity that would let me buy the very country club where my ex-wife had just become a member. After the divorce, I did what any rational person does when their life implodes. I disappeared. Not literally, obviously. I didn't fake my death or move to Costa Rica or join a monastery, though honestly, the monastery thing had some appeal during the particularly rough nights when I was eating cereal for dinner and wondering where everything went wrong. No, I disappeared professionally, socially. I went off the grid in that way where people stop seeing you at the usual places, stop hearing your name in conversations, and eventually just assume you faded into whatever obscurity failed husbands fade into. I deleted my social media accounts, all of them. Facebook, Instagram, that LinkedIn profile where I posted exactly twice, and both times it was because someone told me I had to build my brand. You know what builds your brand? Actually doing shit, not posting inspirational quotes over pictures of sunrises. I cut off contact with the mutual friends Cassandra and I had shared, which wasn't a huge loss considering most of them were her friends who tolerated me the way you tolerate your friend's boring boyfriend at parties. I stopped going to the places we used to frequent, stopped showing up at the networking events and charity galas where people measured your worth by your watch and your zip code. I became a ghost. And let me tell you, being a ghost is incredibly freeing when you've spent years trying to be visible to someone who was always looking past you anyway. But here's the thing about going off the grid. I wasn't hiding, I was building. There's a difference between running away and making a strategic retreat, and I was definitely in the latter category. I took my savings, which was decent thanks to years of being the boring guy who actually saved money instead of blowing it on bottle service and cars that depreciated faster than Cassandra's interest in our marriage. I looked at that bank account and I thought, okay, you've got one shot here. You can play it safe, get a normal job, live a normal life, and die a normal death, or you can bet on yourself. Spoiler alert, I bet on myself. And unlike Cassandra's bet on Mark, mine actually paid off. I reached out to two guys I'd worked with in property management, Marcus Chen and David Rodriguez. These weren't just colleagues. These were the guys who'd been in the trenches with me, who understood that real wealth wasn't built at country clubs. It was built in the unglamorous work of turning broken things into valuable things. Marcus was a financial wizard who could look at a balance sheet and see opportunities where everyone else saw red ink. David was a construction genius who could walk through a condemned building and tell you exactly what it needed to become profitable. We met at a dive bar because, of course we did. This isn't a movie where people make business deals in fancy restaurants with cloth napkins. And I laid out my pitch. We start our own company. We specialize in distressed leisure properties, hotels, resorts, country clubs, places that are failing because they're mismanaged, outdated, or owned by people who stopped caring. We buy them cheap, fix them up, and either flip them or run them ourselves. Marcus looked at me like I'd suggested we start a circus. Leisure properties? Do you know how many of those fail? Exactly, I said, which is why we can buy them for pennies on the dollar. Everyone's scared of them. Everyone thinks they're money pits, but they're only money pits if you don't know what you're doing. David was more optimistic, probably because he was already mentally renovating hypothetical buildings in his head. What's the startup capital? I told them what I had. Marcus whistled low. That's not nothing, but it's not buy a hotel money either. It's buy a struggling property with motivated sellers' money, I countered. We find places that are underwater, where the owners are desperate to get out. We offer them an exit strategy. We take on the debt, we take on the risk, and we do the work everyone else is too lazy or too scared to do. There was a long pause where they both just stared at me, and I could see them doing the mental math. Could this actually work? Was I crazy? Was this going to be a spectacular failure that they'd tell stories about years later while working for someone else? Finally, Marcus grinned. Fuck it, I'm in. David raised his beer. Harrison Hospitality Group has a nice ring to it. I agreed, and just like that, over cheap beer and bar peanuts, we started something real. Something that didn't exist to impress anyone or look good on Instagram or make ex-wives jealous. We started it because we saw an opportunity, and we had the balls to take it. The first few months were brutal, I'm not going to lie. We were working out of David's garage because office space is for people with money, and we were definitely not those people yet. We spent our days cold calling property owners, analyzing financial statements, and touring buildings that looked like they'd been used as sets in post-apocalyptic movies. We saw mold that probably had its own ecosystem. We saw electrical systems that were fire hazards waiting for a spark. We saw pools that had turned into swamps and ballrooms that smelled like something had died in them, which, in one memorable case, something actually had. But we also saw potential. We saw what these places could be with the right investment, the right management, the right vision. And more importantly, we saw sellers who were motivated as hell. People who'd inherited properties they didn't want, investors who'd gotten in over their heads, companies that had expanded too fast and needed to shed assets before they went under completely. Our first acquisition was a small boutique hotel in upstate New York that was hemorrhaging money. The owner was 3 months from bankruptcy and would have sold it to a lamp if the lamp had offered cash. We bought it for basically the cost of the land, took out a loan for renovations, and spent 6 months gutting and rebuilding the entire operation. New management, new branding, updated rooms, actually competent staff, revolutionary concepts, I know. 18 months later, we sold it for 3 times what we paid. The money started rolling in. Not private jet money, but quit our day jobs and hire real employees money. We moved out of David's garage into a proper office. We started getting referrals. Other property managers who knew we were serious and had cash started sending us leads on failing clubs and resorts. And that's when I saw it. Westwood Hills Country Club. It was on a list of distressed properties our broker sent over. The place was bleeding members, the facilities were dated, and the ownership group was fighting among themselves. They were desperate to sell. It was perfect. I didn't tell Marcus and David about my personal connection at first. I presented it as just another opportunity, which it was. The numbers made sense, the location was prime, the potential for turnaround was huge. We ran the numbers, we toured the place incognito, we met with the nervous ownership group, the deal was solid. We made an offer, a lowball offer, because that's what you do with motivated sellers. They countered, we negotiated, and after 6 weeks of back and forth, we had a deal. Harrison Hospitality Group now owned Westwood Hills Country Club. I kept my involvement quiet. The public face of the acquisition was our company. My name wasn't splashed all over the paperwork. Not because I was hiding anything illegal, just because I'm not an idiot, and I knew Cassandra would have made it her personal mission to sabotage the deal if she'd known I was involved. So, while she was attending her charity luncheons and sipping champagne and probably talking shit about her boring ex-husband who'd never amounted to anything, I was signing paychecks for the staff who served her. I was approving the renovations that improved her beloved club. I was the invisible hand that made her social fortress actually function. And she had absolutely no idea. So there I was, standing on the terrace of my own damn country club, watching my ex-wife have what appeared to be a minor stroke while her new husband turned colors that don't exist in nature. Loretta, Cassandra's mother, was there too, which, to be fair, in her world was probably anyone who made less than 7 figures annually. She spotted me about 3 seconds after Cassandra did, and her reaction was almost as good. Her hand went to her pearl necklace, because of course it did, because that's what women like Loretta do when confronted with anything that disrupts their carefully constructed reality, and she actually gasped, like audibly gasped, like she was a Victorian lady who just witnessed someone use the wrong fork. "Oh, Lord," she hissed, loud enough for half the terrace to hear. "It's him. How did he even get past the gate?" I pulled out a chair at a nearby empty table, not at theirs because I'm petty but I'm not rude, and sat down with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing you're about to ruin someone's entire day. "Public road," I said pleasantly, giving her my best smile. "You'd be surprised how democracy works, Loretta. Anyone can drive down a public road. Wild concept, I know." Her face did this thing where it tried to look offended but couldn't quite manage it because Botox had robbed her of most facial expressions. "This is a private club," she managed. "Sure is," I agreed. "Beautiful place. Love what they've done with it recently. Really turned it around." Mark slammed his napkin down on the table hard enough that his water glass jumped. The man was practically vibrating with rage, and I wondered briefly if he was going to have an aneurysm right there on the terrace. That would be awkward to explain to the insurance company. "Manager!" he bellowed, standing up and scanning the terrace like he was summoning a servant in a period drama. Members at other tables were definitely watching now. This was better entertainment than anything they'd get at the club's movie night. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, probably texting their friends about the drama unfolding at the Davenport table. In a place like this, gossip was currency, and I just handed everyone a jackpot. Cassandra stood up too, because apparently this confrontation required everyone to be on their feet. Her face had gone from shocked white to angry red, and her voice had that shrill quality that I remembered all too well from our marriage. "He's not a member. He has no business being here." "Strong stance," I said, examining my fingernails like this was all mildly boring. "Really committing to it. I respect that." "This isn't a joke," she snapped. "You're trespassing." "Am I, though?" I tilted my head, genuinely curious to see how far she'd take this before reality crashed down on her designer-clad shoulders. I mean, define trespassing. Because I'm pretty sure trespassing requires being somewhere you're not allowed to be, and I'm feeling pretty allowed right now. Mark's face was now somewhere between burgundy and eggplant. "You divorced her. You have no connection to this club. You have no right to be here." "Well, when you put it that way," I said thoughtfully, "you make some interesting points. Wrong points, but interesting." Loretta clutched her pearls harder, if that was even possible. I was starting to worry she might actually break the strand, and we'd have the whole dramatic pearls rolling across the floor moment. "Patricia!" she called out, her voice dripping with that entitled tone that suggested she'd never been told no in her entire life. "Patricia Lang, we need you immediately." I settled back in my chair, perfectly comfortable, perfectly calm. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, and I was going to savor every single second of it. The other members were absolutely riveted now. Some had stopped even pretending to eat, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. A couple in the corner had their phones out, definitely recording. This was going to be all over the club's group chat within minutes. Patricia Lang appeared from inside, walking with that measured pace of someone who knew exactly what was happening and was thoroughly enjoying it. Patricia was in her 50s, professional as hell, and had been running the day-to-day operations of the club since before Cassandra and Mark were even members. When we'd acquired the place, she'd been one of the first people I'd met with, and she'd been genuinely excited about our plans to actually invest in improvements instead of just milking the membership fees. She'd also thought it was hilarious that I was Cassandra's ex-husband and had kept that secret like her life depended on it. "Yes, Mr. Davenport?" Patricia asked, her tone perfectly neutral, but I could see the amusement dancing in her eyes. Mark pointed at me like I was a piece of trash that had blown onto the terrace. "This man is trespassing. Remove him immediately." Cassandra jumped in, her voice getting higher and more frantic. "He's not a member. He's my ex-husband, and he has no business being here. This is harassment." "Harassment seems strong," I interjected. "I'm literally just sitting here. I haven't even ordered coffee yet." "You're ruining our brunch!" Cassandra shrieked. "Your brunch was ruined the moment you decided to make a scene," I pointed out. "I was just going to sit here quietly and maybe get some Eggs Benedict. This whole drama thing, that's all you guys." Patricia turned to me, and I could see she was struggling not to smile. "Sir, are you a guest of a member?" This was it. This was the moment. I let the pause hang there for just a beat longer than necessary, watching Cassandra's face cycle through emotions like a slot machine, watching Mark's complexion continue its journey through the color spectrum, watching Loretta grip those pearls like they were the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. "In a way," I said, casually, like I was discussing the weather, "I own the place." The silence that followed was so complete, so absolute, you could have heard a credit card decline from across the lawn. Even the birds seemed to shut up. The universe itself seemed to pause, waiting to see what would happen next. Mark laughed. Actually laughed, but it was that nervous, high-pitched laugh that people do when they're hoping something is a joke, but starting to suspect it isn't. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," I said. "Bought it 8 months ago. Been meaning to drop by more often, but you know how it is. Busy owning multiple properties, running a successful business, living my best life. The usual boring stuff." Cassandra's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. It was beautiful. Patricia turned to Todd, and now she wasn't even trying to hide her smile. "He is, actually. Mr. Harrison is the principal owner of Harrison Hospitality Group, which acquired Westwood Hills Country Club last October." She paused, then looked back at me. "Sir, how would you like to handle their family's membership?" And just like that, the power dynamic shifted so completely that I could physically see Mark and Cassandra process it. They went from righteous and demanding to pale and panicked in about 3 seconds flat. Mark's burgundy face drained to white. Cassandra actually swayed on her feet. Loretta looked like she might actually faint, which would have been dramatic, but also would have required me to help, and I really didn't want to do that. "You?" Cassandra whispered, her voice barely audible. "You own the club?" "Yeah," I smiled at her, the kind of smile that said everything I'd wanted to say for 3 years, but had been too classy to actually voice. Surprise! Should have paid more attention to what I was doing instead of assuming I'd amount to nothing. Professional tip for next time. The entire terrace was dead silent, everyone waiting to see what I'd do next. And honestly, I was kind of waiting to see what I'd do next, too. "Remove him immediately." Patricia stood there like a referee at the world's most satisfying boxing match, waiting for me to make the call. The entire terrace had gone from casual Sunday brunch to must-see TV in about 30 seconds, and I was absolutely here for it. This was the kind of moment you dream about during those long, lonely nights after your divorce, when you're eating ramen and wondering if karma actually exists, or if it's just something people say to make themselves feel better about getting screwed over. Turns out, karma is real. She just takes her sweet time showing up. Mark recovered first, probably because he'd spent his entire career bullshitting his way through corporate presentations, and this was just another performance for him. He straightened his designer tie because, of course, he was wearing a tie to Sunday brunch. The guy probably wore a suit to the beach, and tried to laugh it off. "You can't be serious? You bought this club?" "Yup," I smiled at her, popping the P sound because I'm mature like that. "Signed the papers 8 months ago. Been improving it ever since. You're welcome, by the way. That new espresso machine in the cafe? My idea. The upgraded pool heating system? Also me. The fact that the staff actually gets paid a living wage now? Yeah, that was kind of a priority." Cassandra's hands were shaking, like visibly trembling. Her voice came out strangled, like someone was squeezing her throat. You've owned this place while we've been members?" "Yeah, funny how that works out, isn't it?" I leaned back in my chair, getting comfortable. "I've been signing off on your membership renewals, approving the catering for your little charity events, reading the comment cards you leave at the front desk. You left one last month, actually. Something about the water temperature in the pool. We fixed that." Mark's face was doing that color-changing thing again, cycling back to red. "This is absurd. You can't just buy a country club." "Apparently I can," I replied, examining my nails like this conversation was mildly boring instead of the highlight of my entire year. And, judging by the quarterly reports, I did it pretty well. Revenues up 23%, member satisfaction at an all-time high, and we're actually turning a profit now. Wild. What happens when you treat a business like a business instead of your personal playground? Loretta finally found her voice, which had gone up about 3 octaves. "Patricia, surely there are rules about this. He can't just waltz in here and claim ownership." Patricia pulled out her tablet. She always had that thing with her, God bless her organized soul, and swiped through a few screens. "Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Harrison's ownership is fully documented and legal. Would you like me to show you the acquisition paperwork?" "No!" Cassandra practically shouted, then seemed to realize how loud she was and lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "No, that won't be necessary." "Cool," I said. "Patricia, would you mind pulling up the Davenport family's membership contract? I'd like to review it." I watched Mark's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Cassandra went even paler, which I didn't think was physically possible. She looked like she might actually pass out, and part of me kinda hoped she would, because that would make this story even better when I told it later. Patricia nodded, completely professional, though I could see she was eating this up. She dealt with the Davenports' entitled attitude for years, and now she got to watch them squirm. "The Davenport family membership," she read from her tablet, her voice clear enough for everyone on the terrace to hear. "Active since 2016. Annual dues, $42,000. Subject to termination for conduct unbecoming or behavior detrimental to club reputation." The silence was so thick you could have cut it with one of those overpriced steak knives they used here. Mark's voice cracked slightly. "You wouldn't dare." I looked at him, really looked at him. This corporate peacock who'd swooped in and taken my wife because he had a bigger bank account and shinier toys. This guy who thought cufflinks made him intelligent and money made him important. This guy who'd probably never worked an honest day in his life, who'd never had to actually build something from nothing, who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. "Actually, Mark," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I would. You just tried to have the owner kicked out of his own property. You called security on me. You demanded I be removed. You made a scene in front of every member here, disrupted their peaceful Sunday brunch, and generally acted like an entitled jackass. That seems fairly unbecoming, wouldn't you say?" Cassandra grabbed Mark's arm. "He's bluffing. He wouldn't actually—" "Oh, I absolutely would," I interrupted. "Patricia." She stood at attention, waiting. This woman deserved a raise. Hell, she deserved a medal. Effective immediately, I said, taking my time with each word, savoring them like fine wine. The Davenport family's membership is suspended for 60 days, pending review of their conduct and whether they represent the kind of members we want at Westwood Hills. You know that sound a balloon makes when all the air suddenly rushes out? That's basically what happened to Cassandra right then. She deflated completely, her whole body seeming to shrink. "You're punishing us because of what?" she whispered. "Because of your clothes? Because we thought you didn't belong here?" "Not at all," I said, standing up now because this moment deserved to be delivered on my feet. "I'm punishing you because you opened your mouth before using your brain. You made assumptions. You were rude, entitled, and frankly, embarrassing to watch. This club has standards, Cassandra. Standards you've apparently forgotten in your rush to feel superior to everyone around you." A few members actually clapped. Quiet, polite golf claps, but still, you could see the relief on some of their faces. Apparently, the Davenport family wasn't exactly beloved around here. Who knew? Mark tried one last time, his voice desperate now. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I shrugged, picking up the menu because, honestly, I was getting hungry. "But I'll do it while sitting in your usual corner booth, drinking coffee that I own in a building that has my name on the deed. So, I think I'll survive the regret." Patricia escorted them out, their perfect Sunday ruined, their social standing demolished, their membership suspended. As they walked away, Loretta still clutching those damn pearls, I finally ordered my coffee. Best cup I ever had. Cassandra stood there, blinking like someone had just slapped her with a reality check, her mouth opening and closing while her brain tried to process what I just said. The mascara she probably spent 45 minutes applying was starting to run slightly at the corners. And honestly, it was the most human she'd looked in years. Turns out, public humiliation is a hell of a makeup remover. "You?" she managed to get out, her voice trembling somewhere between disbelief and rage. "You bought the club? You?" "Me?" I confirmed, sipping the water that had been sitting at my table. "Is this really that hard to comprehend? I mean, I know you thought I was going nowhere, but damn, Cassandra, I've owned the place for 8 months. You've been here like every week. How did you not notice?" "How was I supposed to know?" she shot back, her voice getting shrill again, that pitch that used to make me want to stick forks in my ears during our marriage. "You never told me." "Why would I tell you?" I asked reasonably. "We're divorced, we don't have kids, we don't have shared assets. You made it pretty clear you wanted nothing to do with my boring, directionless life. So I gave you what you wanted, complete absence of me from your world. You're welcome." Mark, who'd been silent for a solid 30 seconds, which might have been a personal record for him, finally found his voice. This is vindictive. You bought this place just to get back at us?" I actually laughed at that, like genuinely laughed, because the ego on this guy was something else. "Well, Mark, buddy, no. I bought this place because it was a solid investment opportunity. A distressed property in a premium location with motivated sellers and huge upside potential. The fact that my ex-wife and her new husband had made it their social headquarters, that was just the universe's way of saying, hey, good job, here's a bonus." "I don't believe you," Cassandra said, but her voice had lost its conviction. She was starting to realize that this was real, that this was actually happening, that her boring ex-husband had somehow managed to buy the very place she'd been using as proof of her upgraded life. "Don't have to believe me," I said with a shrug. "Belief is optional. Reality isn't. Patricia, you want to fill them in on the details?" Patricia stepped forward, still maintaining that professional demeanor, even though I knew she was dying inside with how good this was. Harrison Hospitality Group acquired Westwood Hills Country Club on October 15th of last year through a competitive bidding process. The sale was finalized on November 3rd. Mr. Harrison and his partners have since invested approximately $2.3 million in property improvements, staff compensation increases, and operational upgrades. $2.3 million, I added helpfully. That's roughly 55 years' worth of your annual membership dues, Mark, just for context. His face went through another color transition. I was starting to worry about his blood pressure. "You can't just," he started, then stopped because I think even he realized how stupid he was about to sound. "Can't just what? Invest in my own property? Run a successful business? Exist in a space you decided was yours?" I leaned forward slightly. "Here's the thing, Mark. You don't own this place. You never owned this place. You're a member, a customer. And right now, you're a customer who just tried to have the owner thrown out. That's not great business sense, my guy." Loretta had been silent this entire time, which was probably a first for her. She looked like she was having some kind of internal crisis, her worldview crumbling around her like cheap drywall. But you were in property management," she said weakly, as if that somehow made this impossible. "Still am," I said, "just manage my own properties now, instead of someone else's. Turns out, when you actually know what you're doing and you're willing to put in the work, you can build something pretty substantial. Revolutionary concept, I know." Cassandra's hands were shaking worse now. "You've been watching us this whole time?" "Watching? No, that would be creepy. Owning the business where you happen to be a member? That's just capitalism, baby." I stood up because I felt like this moment deserved me being on my feet. "I haven't been watching you, Cassandra. I've been building. A successful one. The kind of life you said I'd never have because I lack direction." She flinched at that, and I saw recognition flash across her face. She remembered saying that. Of course she did. "Well," I continued, "turns out I had plenty of direction. I just wasn't sharing the GPS coordinates with you. And now here we are. Me owning a multi-million-dollar property. You standing on my terrace having a meltdown because you can't handle the fact that the guy you discarded like yesterday's trash actually made something of himself." "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Fair?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You left me when things got hard. You married a guy with more money than personality. You spent 3 years rubbing your upgrade in everyone's face, including mine, through mutual friends who couldn't wait to tell me how much better you were doing. And now you're mad because I succeeded without you? That's not unfair, Cassandra. That's just you realizing you made a bad bet." Mark tried to salvage something, anything. "We could sue for emotional distress." "Or," I said cheerfully, "go ahead. My lawyers would love that. They get bored with the easy stuff. A frivolous lawsuit from a suspended member would really make their day. Plus, discovery would be fun. We get to dig into all your finances, your behavior here at the club, every complaint that's been filed about you. And trust me, there have been complaints." Patricia nodded. Several, actually. Mark's face somehow went even redder. Cassandra looked like she might actually cry, which almost made me feel bad. But then I remembered 5 years of being made to feel inadequate, of being treated like an embarrassment, of being left when things got tough. Yeah, I didn't feel that bad. "So, here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're going to leave. Patricia is going to send you a formal letter about your suspension. You're going to spend the next 60 days thinking real hard about whether you want to be members here when your behavior is going to be under a microscope. And I'm going to sit here, have my coffee, maybe some Eggs Benedict, and enjoy my Sunday." Cassandra opened her mouth one more time. "I can't believe you're doing this." "I can't believe it took me this long," I replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a club to run." And with that, they left. Finally, the show was over. By the time I made it to my car, my phone was already going absolutely insane. I'm talking full-blown digital meltdown. Buzz, 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 like I'd kicked a hornet's nest made entirely of notifications. I didn't even have to look to know who it was, but I looked anyway, because I'm only human, and watching someone spiral via text message is honestly its own form of entertainment. Cassandra. Of course it was Cassandra. The first text came through at 11:47 a.m., exactly 12 minutes after she'd been escorted off the terrace like someone who'd had too much wine and started a fight at a wedding. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." No hi, no can we talk, just straight to the victim narrative. Classic Cassandra. Take no responsibility, claim maximum damage, make it all about how she'd been wronged. I almost responded with, "You humiliated yourself, I just watched," but decided to let her keep going. This was clearly going to be a marathon, not a sprint. 11:48 a.m. "You've ruined our reputation." Our reputation, like she and Mark were some kind of power couple whose social standing mattered to anyone outside their little bubble of country club narcissism? Lady, your reputation was that you were high-maintenance snobs who treated the staff like furniture. I didn't ruin anything. I just held up a mirror. 11:49 a.m. "How could you be so petty?" There it was, the word I'd been waiting for. Petty. Because standing up for yourself after being treated like garbage is apparently petty? Because buying a business and running it successfully is petty? Because not letting people walk all over you in your own establishment is petty? Sure, Cassandra, I'm the petty one here. 11:51 a.m. "Mark is livid. He wants to talk to you." Oh, I'm sure he does. I'm sure Mark would love to have a little man-to-man conversation where he tries to intimidate me or buy me off or whatever corporate finance bros do when they don't get their way. Pass. 11:53 a.m. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights." Rights in all caps, because nothing says I'm losing an argument quite like random capitalization. Yeah, you have rights. You have the right to be treated according to the membership agreement you signed, which includes a clause about conduct that you definitely violated. You also have the right to remain silent, which I highly recommend you exercise. I waited until I was in my car, engine running, air conditioning blasting away the late morning heat, before I responded. Just one line, clean, simple, devastating. Dress code violation. You know how it is. I could practically hear her screaming through the phone. It was beautiful. The drive home took about 20 minutes, and my phone didn't stop buzzing the entire time. I ignored it. Let her vent into the void. Let her fill up my text messages with her outrage and her disbelief in her wounded pride. I'd read them later when I had a drink in my hand and could fully appreciate the poetry of someone who'd spent years making me feel small, now experiencing what it felt like to be on the other side of that equation. When I got home to my modest but paid-off condo that didn't require a country club membership to validate its worth, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and brother, this qualified. I sat down on my couch, put my feet up on the coffee table, and finally scrolled through the damage. 23 texts from Cassandra. 23! Each one more desperate and angry than the last. They progressed through the 5 stages of grief in record time. Denial. This isn't real. Anger. You're a vindictive asshole. Bargaining. Can we please just talk about this like adults? Depression. I can't believe you do this to me. And finally, acceptance. Fine, you win. Are you happy now? Was I happy? That was the question, wasn't it? I took a sip of bourbon and thought about it. Really thought about it. 3 years ago, I'd signed divorce papers feeling like a failure, like I hadn't been enough, hadn't done enough, hadn't been exciting or successful or interesting enough to keep my wife interested. I'd gone through months of questioning everything about myself, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough. And now, here I sat, owner of multiple properties, running a successful business, having just suspended my ex-wife's country club membership in front of her entire social circle, and she was asking if I was happy? Yeah, I was pretty fucking happy. I didn't respond to her texts. What was there to say? Nothing I could text would hit as hard as what had already happened. Sometimes silence is the loudest response. Instead, I called Marcus and David, my business partners, who'd been with me through the whole journey. They picked up on a three-way call, and I didn't even have to say anything before Marcus was laughing. "Bro, Patricia already called us," he said you handled it perfectly. "Patricia called you?" I asked. "Are you kidding? She was dying to tell someone. Said it was the most professional, savage move she'd seen in 20 years of club management." David chimed in. "She also said half the members want to buy you a drink and the other half are terrified you're going to suspend them next." "Good," I said. "A little bit of fear keeps people honest." "So, how does it feel?" Marcus asked. "The big revenge moment. Was it everything you dreamed?" I swirled the bourbon in my glass, watching the light catch the amber liquid. Honestly, it wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been buying the place just to kick them out. This was just consequences. They were rude to the owner. I responded appropriately. That's just business. "Business with a side of poetic justice," David added. "Maybe," I admitted, "but mostly just business." We talked for another hour, going over some other properties we were looking at, discussing expansion plans, the usual work stuff. Normal life. Successful life. The kind of life I'd built while Cassandra was busy posting Instagram photos of champagne brunches and Caribbean vacations. When I hung up, I looked at my phone one more time. 2 new texts from Cassandra. "We need to talk about this like adults. Please." That please sitting there all alone in its own text message? Small, vulnerable. The way I'd felt so many times during our marriage when I was trying to get her to see me, to value me, to treat our relationship like it mattered. I thought about responding, thought about being magnanimous in victory, about taking the high road, about showing her I was the bigger person. Then I remembered every time she'd made me feel inadequate, every subtle put-down, every time she'd looked at me like I was disappointing her just by existing. I turned off my phone, finished my bourbon, and smiled. Some conversations aren't worth having. Some people don't deserve your time or your explanations or your emotional labor. Sometimes the best response is living well and letting them sit with their own choices. And man, was I living well. 2 days after the great terrace meltdown of Westwood Hills, yeah, I was calling it that now because it deserved a title, I was sitting in my home office, minding my own business, working through some renovation proposals for another property we'd just acquired, when my email dinged with the kind of professional subject line that immediately tells you someone's lawyer is about to waste everyone's time. Formal complaint. Davenport Family versus Harrison Hospitality Group. I sat back in my chair and actually laughed out loud. Of course they were doing this. Because people like Cassandra and Mark don't just accept consequences like normal humans. They lawyer up and try to make their problems everyone else's problems. It's like their default setting when reality doesn't align with their expectations. I opened the email and started reading, and with each paragraph, my smile got wider. This was comedy gold. This was better like anything on Netflix. This was a masterclass in how rich people think the legal system is their personal complaint department. The complaint, sent from some fancy law firm with 3 last names and probably offices in a building with a doorman, cited emotional distress and abuse of power as the primary grievances. Apparently, my decision to suspend their membership had caused Cassandra severe psychological harm and had damaged their standing in the community. Mark claimed he'd suffered reputational injury and that my actions were retaliatory and vindictive in nature. Retaliatory and vindictive? Like those were bad things when someone tries to have you thrown out of your own property? The letter went on for pages, literally 6 pages of legal jargon that could have been summarized as, "Our clients are mad that they experienced consequences for their actions. Please make the bad man apologize and give us money." They were demanding reinstatement of their membership with a formal apology, compensation for emotional damages to the tune of $50,000, because apparently that's what hurt feelings cost these days, and a guarantee that I would have no further direct contact or involvement with the Davenport family's membership status. That last part really got me. They wanted me to own the club, but not be allowed to make decisions about their membership? That's like buying a restaurant and being told you can't decide which customers to serve. The audacity was almost impressive. I forwarded the email to our legal team with a subject line that just said, "lol." Within an hour, I had 3 lawyers on a conference call, and I could hear at least 2 of them trying not to laugh. Jennifer Park, our lead attorney, and a woman who'd seen every kind of frivolous lawsuit in her 20-year career, was the first to speak. "Okay, so I've read through this entire complaint, and I have thoughts." "Please share," I said, leaning back in my chair and putting my feet up on the desk, because this was about to be entertaining. First thought, this is hilarious. Second thought, this is completely without merit. Third thought, we're going to have so much fun destroying this. She paused. Should I be concerned that I'm enjoying this as much as I am? Embrace it, I said. Life's too short not to enjoy watching entitled people learn that lawyers can't actually fix stupid. David Chun, one of our other attorneys, jumped in. I've pulled all the documentation from the incident. Security footage, witness statements from other members, Patricia's incident report, their membership contract with the behavioral clause they signed, and, this is my favorite part, a complaint log showing 7 previous incidents involving the Davenport family. 7? I sat up. What kind of incidents? Oh, it's good, David said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Complaints about them being rude to staff, demanding special treatment, making other members uncomfortable with loud arguments, Mark getting into a verbal altercation with another member over a parking spot. There's even one from last year where Cassandra allegedly threw a drink at a waiter because her salad had the wrong dressing. She threw a drink at someone? I couldn't believe it. Actually, yes, I could. That tracked perfectly with the Cassandra I knew. According to 3 witnesses, yes. The previous management gave them a warning, but didn't suspend them because, and I quote, "they're high-paying members and we can't afford to lose the revenue." Well, I said, we're not the previous management, are we? Jennifer laughed. No, we are not. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We respond with a comprehensive report documenting every single incident, every complaint, every piece of evidence showing that the suspension was not only justified, but arguably should have happened sooner. We cite the behavioral clause in their membership contract that they signed, we include the security footage of them causing a scene on the terrace, and we very politely tell them that if they'd like to pursue legal action, we'll see them in court, where all of this becomes public record. I love it, I said. How long will that take? Oh, we can have it done by end of day tomorrow. I'm motivated. This is the kind of case that reminds me why I went to law school, to tell rich people that money doesn't exempt them from basic human decency. You're my favorite lawyer, I told her. I know, she replied. Now, one more thing. They're claiming emotional distress. To prove that, they need to show evidence of actual psychological harm. Therapy records, doctor's notes, that kind of thing. Do you think they have any of that? I thought about Cassandra's Instagram, which I checked once or twice. Okay, maybe more than twice since the incident. She'd posted a photo yesterday of her and Mark at some restaurant, smiling and holding wine glasses, with a caption about not letting negativity bring us down. Pretty sure her social media posts showing her living her best life are going to undermine the whole severe psychological harm, I said. Oh my God, please tell me you screenshot those, Jennifer said. Way ahead of you. You're my favorite client. The next day, our legal team sent their response. 38 pages. 30 glorious pages of documentation, legal precedent, contractual obligations, and a very professional way of saying, your client screwed up and are now facing consequences. Please grow up. The response included security footage of the entire terrace incident, time-stamped and all, transcripts of exactly what was said by all parties, witness statements from 6 other members who were present, the behavioral clause from the membership contract, highlighted, the log of 7 previous complaints against the Davenport family, documentation of similar suspensions at other clubs for similar behavior, a very detailed explanation of how property owners have the right to refuse service, screenshots of Cassandra's social media posts demonstrating she was not, in fact, suffering from severe psychological harm. My personal favorite, a copy of the club's dress code policy with a note that I had technically violated it, which made their attempt to have me removed even more ironic, since they were citing rules they themselves frequently ignored. The final paragraph was a work of art. Jennifer had written it herself, and it basically said, your clients attempted to have the property owner removed from his own establishment based on their incorrect assumption that he didn't belong there. When corrected, they responded with hostility and entitlement. The suspension stands. If you wish to pursue litigation, we welcome discovery, as it will make public record the full history of your client's behavior at our establishment. We suggest you advise your clients to accept the consequences of their actions and use this 60-day suspension period to reflect on how to conduct themselves appropriately in the future. Professional, devastating, perfect. I bought Jennifer a bottle of very expensive scotch. The Davenport family's lawyers responded 3 days later with a much shorter email that basically amounted to, we're withdrawing the complaint. No explanation, no apology, just a terse notification that they wouldn't be pursuing legal action. I imagine their lawyers sitting them down and explaining exactly how badly this would go for them in court. I imagine Mark's face when he realized that all those previous incidents were documented and would become public record. I imagine Cassandra finally understanding that throwing money at a problem doesn't work when the other side has just as much money and actual evidence. Case closed. Jennifer emailed me. Literally one of the easiest wins of my career. They took one look at our documentation and ran for the hills. Think they learned anything? I asked. Probably not, she replied, but they definitely learned not to mess with us. That night, I got one more text from Cassandra. Don't know how she got my new number, but wealthy people have their ways. It was just one line. Can we talk privately? I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her stew in whatever consequences she was dealing with. Part of me was curious about what she could possibly want to say now that the legal threat had failed spectacularly. I responded, sure, but we're meeting somewhere fancy, wouldn't want to embarrass the owner. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea. We scheduled a meeting for the following Sunday. Same place, same terrace, different power dynamic, and I was very much looking forward to it. Sunday morning rolled around with that crisp autumn air that makes everything feel like a fresh start, which was ironic considering I was about to have what would probably be the final conversation with my ex-wife. I got to the club early, before the brunch crowd descended, and sat at a table on the terrace with a view of the parking lot. Wanted to see her arrive, wanted to watch her walk up those steps, knowing that this time she wasn't walking into her territory. She was walking into mine. She pulled up in Mark's Mercedes, because of course she was driving his car, probably some weird power move, or maybe he just didn't want to face me again. I didn't blame him. The guy had been humiliated enough for one lifetime. Cassandra got out, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, heels that clicked against the pavement like a countdown timer, and sunglasses that covered half her face. The uniform of someone trying very hard to look like they have their life together. I watched her climb the terrace steps, watched her pause at the top when she saw me sitting there. Coffee already ordered, looking completely at ease in my navy polo and jeans. Still not club attire, but then again, dress codes are more like suggestions when you own the place. She walked over slowly, and I could see her hands shaking slightly, even from a distance. Good. She should be nervous. She should feel at least a fraction of the anxiety she'd caused me over the years. "Thanks for meeting me," she said quietly, sliding into the chair across from me. Her voice was different, smaller. The bravado was gone, stripped away by 2 weeks of suspension and a failed lawsuit. "Figured we should talk," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Clear the air, all that mature adult stuff people are supposed to do." She took off her sunglasses, and I saw her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying, or not sleeping, or both. Part of me, a very small part, felt a twinge of something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered 5 years of being made to feel inadequate, and that twinge evaporated pretty damn quick. "You didn't have to humiliate me," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Not like that, not in front of everyone." I took a sip of my coffee, let her words hang in the air for a second. "You're right," I said finally. "I didn't have to. But you spent years doing it to me, Cassandra. Years of making me feel like I wasn't good enough, wasn't exciting enough, wasn't worth your time. So yeah, maybe I didn't have to humiliate you, but consider it symmetrical therapy." She flinched. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "Didn't you, though?" I leaned forward slightly. "Every time you introduced me as your husband with that apologetic tone in your voice. Every time you told people I was in property management, like you were admitting I had a disease. Every time you compared me to your friends' husbands and found me lacking. You absolutely meant it, Cassandra. You just didn't think I was paying attention." "I was unhappy," she said weakly. Like that explained everything. "So was I replied. "Difference is, I tried to fix it. You just traded it in for a newer model." She looked down at her hands, those perfectly manicured nails that probably required weekly maintenance. "I thought Mark was what I wanted, the lifestyle, the money, the excitement. And now," she laughed, but it was bitter, "now I'm married to a man who cares more about his stock portfolio than anything else, who treats me like another asset he acquired, who—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter." "It kinda does," I said. "You left me because you thought you were upgrading. You thought reliability and steadiness were bugs, not features. You thought the grass was greener. So, what happened? Did you find out that AstroTurf isn't actually better than real grass?" She looked up at me, and for a second, I saw the woman I'd married. Not the social climbing, status-obsessed version she'd become, but the person underneath all that. "You've changed," she said softly. "I had to," I replied. "When someone tells you you're not good enough for 3 years straight, you have 2 choices. You can believe them and shrink, or you can prove them wrong and grow. I chose option B. I never said you weren't good enough. Cassandra, those were literally your exact words when you left. I can't be married to someone who isn't good enough for the life I want. Don't rewrite history now that it's inconvenient." She went quiet because she knew I was right. She'd said it, I'd heard it, we both remembered it. "For what it's worth," she said after a long pause, "I was wrong about you, about what mattered, about everything, really. That's a start," I acknowledged, "but it doesn't undo 3 years of damage. It doesn't erase how you made me feel. And it definitely doesn't change the fact that you tried to have me kicked out of my own property 2 weeks ago." "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I interrupted. "You assumed. You saw what you expected to see. Your boring ex-husband who couldn't possibly have made something of himself. And you acted accordingly. That's on you, Cassandra. That's all on you." She looked like she might cry again. And part of me felt bad about that. But the larger part of me, the part that had spent 3 years rebuilding himself from the ground up, felt like this conversation was necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering too long. "So, what now?" she asked quietly. "Are you going to let us back in after the 60 days? I thought about it, really thought about it. I could ban them permanently, could make sure they never set foot in this club again. That would be satisfying in a petty, vindictive way. Or I could let them back in, let them see me here regularly, let them live with the knowledge that they were guests in my house." "That depends," I said finally. "Are you going to behave like an adult? Are you going to treat the staff with respect? Are you going to remember that being a member here is a privilege, not a right?" "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, we will, I promise." "Then we'll see," I said. "The suspension stands for the full 60 days. After that, Patricia will reach out about reinstatement. But understand this. One more incident, one more complaint, one more display of the entitled shit that got you suspended in the first place, and you're done. Permanently. No second chances." She nodded, understanding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said, standing up. "You haven't earned your way back in." As I turned to leave, Mark's Mercedes pulled back into the parking lot. He must have dropped her off and circled back, too scared to actually come up to the terrace himself. Can't say I blamed him. "One more thing," I said, turning back to Cassandra. "Being underestimated? Turns out it's a great business plan. So, thanks. Thanks for leaving when things got hard. Thanks for thinking I'd never amount to anything. Thanks for giving me the motivation to prove you wrong." I walked away before she could respond, heading through the marble lobby where staff members nodded at me with respect. Not the fake respect people give to rich assholes, but real respect, earned through treating them like human beings and paying them fairly. Patricia caught me at the door. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," I said. "Might let them back in after the 60 days. "You're more forgiving than I would be," she said with a smile. "Not forgiveness," I corrected. "Strategy. Having them here, knowing what they know now, that's better than banning them. That's a constant reminder that they bet against the wrong guy." She laughed. "Remind me never to underestimate you." "Smart policy," I agreed. I walked out into the morning sun, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt genuinely at peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though that helped, but because I'd finally proven to myself what I'd always suspected, that I was never the problem. The problem was being with someone who couldn't see my worth. Now I owned that worth, literally and figuratively. And that felt better than any victory I could have imagined. 3 weeks after my conversation with Cassandra, I found myself back at the club on another Sunday morning, but this time it wasn't for drama or confrontation or any kind of revenge plot. I was actually there to work, which sounds boring as hell, but was actually pretty satisfying. Marcus and David were flying in to review our quarterly numbers and discuss potential new acquisitions. And the club had a conference room that was way nicer than our actual office. Plus, the coffee was better, significantly better. I was sitting in the lobby going through some documents when Mark walked in. Alone this time. No Cassandra clutching his arm, no entourage of country club friends to back him up. Just Mark, looking significantly less confident than the last time I'd seen him. Wearing a golf outfit that probably cost more than my first car, but somehow made him look smaller rather than impressive. He saw me and froze. I watched him go through the mental calculation, turn around and leave, or actually face the guy who'd publicly demolished his ego 3 weeks ago. To his credit, he didn't run. He walked over slowly, like a man approaching a firing squad. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice missing all that corporate peacock bravado I remembered. I looked up from my documents, taking my time. "Sure, have a seat." He sat down across from me, and I could see he'd rehearsed this. His hands were fidgeting, he kept clearing his throat, all the signs of someone who'd practiced a speech in the mirror and was now terrified of actually delivering it. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "for that day on the terrace, for trying to have you removed, for everything, really." I set down my documents, giving him my full attention. "Okay, I'm listening." He took a breath. "I was a dick. There's no other way to say it. I saw you in jeans and assumed you didn't belong. And I made a scene because I wanted to look important in front of Cassandra and her mother. I didn't think, I just reacted, and I was completely out of line." "You were," I agreed. "But go on."
And the lawsuit thing, that was stupid. Cassandra was upset, and her mother was in her ear about standing up for ourselves, and I just went along with it because it was easier than telling them they were wrong. He rubbed his face. My lawyers explained in very small words exactly how badly that would have gone for us. "Yeah, my lawyers enjoyed that," I said. "One of them bought a celebratory bottle of champagne." Mark actually smiled a little at that. "Look, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am sorry. Not just because you own the place and could ban us permanently, but because it was shitty behavior and you didn't deserve it." I studied him for a moment. This wasn't the same guy who'd barked at me to leave 3 weeks ago. This was someone who'd actually been humbled, which is a rare sight among the country club set. "Apology accepted," I said, "but let me be clear. You screw up again, and I won't be nearly as understanding." "I know," he said quickly. "I get it. One strike and we're out." "Good." I paused, then decided to throw him a bone. "For what it's worth, I didn't buy this place to screw with you and Cassandra. That really was just a bonus feature." He laughed, and it sounded genuine. Some bonus feature. Cassandra's barely slept since it happened. She's been spiraling about what everyone thinks, about our reputation, about, he trailed off, shaking his head, about the fact that her boring ex-husband ended up more successful than she expected. "I offered," I said. "Yeah," he admitted. "That's pretty much it. She keeps talking about how she had no idea you were capable of this, and I keep thinking maybe she should have paid more attention." That surprised me. "You saying that to make me feel better, or do you actually mean it?" Mark looked uncomfortable. "Can I be honest with you? And this stays between us." "Sure," I said, curious now. "I think Cassandra built this whole narrative about you in her head after the divorce. The failed husband, the guy who couldn't give her the life she wanted, the boring, reliable guy who'd never amount to much. And she needed that narrative to justify leaving you for me. You know, she needed you to be the wrong choice so that I could be the right one. And now that narrative's been completely destroyed," I said. "Completely obliterated," he confirmed. "And she's having a hard time reconciling the reality that you built something impressive with what she told herself about you. It's causing some issues." I shouldn't have felt satisfied hearing that, but I absolutely did. "Issues between you two?" He hesitated, then nodded. "She keeps comparing, keeps talking about how you were when you were together versus how you are now. Keeps wondering out loud if she made a mistake." He looked at me directly. "I'm not gonna lie, man. It sucks being the rebound guy who's starting to look like the downgrade." I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "Mark, I'm gonna tell you something, and you can take it or leave it. Cassandra left me because I wasn't exciting enough, wasn't rich enough, wasn't whatever enough to match her fantasy. But here's the thing. I was always capable of this. The potential was always there. She just couldn't see it because she was too busy looking at the surface instead of the foundation." He was quiet, processing that. "You want my advice?" I continued. "Stop trying to compete with a version of me that only exists in her head now. I'm not that guy anymore, and you're not me. Figure out what your relationship actually is instead of what she wishes it was." "That's Surprisingly helpful advice from someone whose life I tried to make miserable 3 weeks ago, he said. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises, I said. Plus, holding grudges is exhausting, and I've got better things to do. Mark stood up, extending his hand. Thanks for not being as much of an asshole as I deserved. I shook his hand. Don't make me regret it. He left, and I went back to my documents. But I couldn't focus. The conversation had stirred up thoughts I'd been trying to avoid. Was I doing all this? The success, the club ownership, the whole trajectory of my life, to prove Cassandra wrong? Or was I doing it for myself? Patricia found me 20 minutes later, still staring at the same page. You okay? She asked. You look contemplative. It's weird, I said. Just thinking. This about the Davenport situation? Kind of. Mark just apologized. Actually seemed genuine about it. Huh, she said. Character growth. Didn't see that coming. Right. I set down the documents. But it got me thinking. Did I buy this place because it was a good investment, or because I wanted to stick it to my ex-wife? Patricia considered that. Does it have to be one or the other? What do you mean?
I mean, maybe it was both. Maybe you saw a good investment opportunity, and the fact that it was Cassandra's social headquarters made it extra appealing. That doesn't make the business decision any less sound, and it doesn't make your success any less legitimate. She smiled. You're allowed to enjoy the irony while still being good at your job. When did you become so wise? I asked. I've been managing country clubs for 20 years. You see a lot of human nature in this job. Most of it is petty, some of it is beautiful, and all of it is entertaining if you have the right perspective. Marcus and David arrived an hour later, and we spent the afternoon going over numbers. The club was performing better than projected. Membership applications were up, and we'd gotten requests from 2 other struggling clubs asking if we'd be interested in acquisition talks. Harrison Hospitality Group was officially on the map. You know what this means, right? Marcus said, grinning. We're going to need to hire more staff. Maybe get an actual office instead of working out of David's garage. The garage has character, David protested. The garage smells like paint thinner and broken dreams, Marcus countered. We can afford better now. We celebrated that night at the club's restaurant. The 3 of us, plus Patricia, who'd become an unofficial 4th partner in spirit, if not in equity, over steaks and wine that I didn't have to check the price of before ordering. We talked about the future. More acquisitions, bigger properties, maybe even franchising our management model to other clubs that needed help. It felt good. It felt earned. And most importantly, it felt like mine. Not something I was doing to prove anyone wrong, but something I was building because I was actually good at it. As the night wound down and Marcus and David headed to their hotel, I walked through the club one more time, past the terrace where it had all gone down, through the lobby with its ridiculous chandeliers, around the grounds that we'd spent months improving. This place that had once represented everything I wasn't good enough for, now represented everything I'd built. That's when I saw Cassandra. She was alone, sitting on a bench near the garden, staring at nothing. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Couldn't sleep? I asked. Something like that, she said quietly. What are you doing here so late? Had a meeting, celebrated some good news, just doing a final walkthrough before heading home. She nodded, then, after a moment, said, I saw you talking to Mark earlier. He apologized. It was surprisingly mature of him. He's been different since everything happened, she said. More thoughtful, less performative. She looked at me. You were right, about the symmetrical therapy thing. I needed to feel what I made you feel. I needed to understand. And do you? I asked. Understand? I think so, she said. I treated you like you weren't enough because I wasn't enough. I was so focused on appearances and status and what everyone else thought that I couldn't see what actually mattered. And by the time I figured it out, you'd already moved on. I sat down on the bench, keeping a respectful distance between us. For what it's worth, Cassandra, I don't hate you. I did for a while, but it's exhausting and ultimately pointless. You made choices, I made choices, and here we are. Here we are, she repeated. You owning the club, me suspended from it, Mark apologizing, me questioning everything. She laughed softly. Not how I thought this chapter of my life would go. Life's funny that way, I said. You think you know how the story goes, and then, plot twist. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and I realized this was it. This was actual closure. Not the confrontational kind, not the revenge kind, but the quiet kind, where two people who used to mean something to each other acknowledged that they've both moved on. I should go, I said, standing up. Got an early meeting tomorrow. Of course you do, she said with a small smile. The successful businessman with his empire to run. Something like that, I agreed. Take care of yourself, Cassandra. You too, she said. And thank you for not making this worse than it had to be. I walked away through the marble lobby one last time that night, past the staff who were cleaning up after the evening service. Patricia was still in her office, wrapping up paperwork.
Heading out? She asked. Yeah, I said. Long day. Good day, though, she said. We did good work here. You should be proud. I am, I said, and meant it. I really am. I drove home that night with the windows down, letting the cool air clear my head. The city lights blurred past, and I thought about everything that had happened. The divorce, the rebuild, the acquisition, the confrontation, the resolution. All of it leading to this moment where I finally, genuinely felt at peace. Cassandra had been wrong about me. Mark had been wrong about me. Hell, I'd probably been wrong about me for a while there. But I'd figured it out eventually. I'd learned that being underestimated isn't a curse, it's an opportunity. That steady and reliable aren't weaknesses, they're foundations. That sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well and building something you're proud of. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and got ready for another day of work. Because that's what you do when you own multiple properties and run a growing hospitality company. You show up. You do the work. You make the boring, reliable, steady choices that compound over time into something extraordinary. And if your ex-wife happens to witness that extraordinary thing while sipping overpriced champagne at a club you own, well, that's just the cherry on top of a sundae you are going to enjoy anyway. I had closure. I had success. I had peace. And most importantly, I had proof that the quiet guy who keeps his head down and does the work, he's the one who ends up winning in the end. Game over. I won. Time to find the next challenge.